back in the woods.
Afternoon, guys. Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. Got a strip of woods I'm in right here. I've got a pipeline on one side and an open field on my property on the other side. There's quite a few small saplings, maples, oaks, things like that in here, and they'll be really good small material to use to make a pack frame with. We're going to talk a little bit about diagonal lashing today and making a pack frame very similar to the one that Otzi used 3,500 years ago, also known as the Roycraft pack frame. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about how to utilize that for packing your gear as well. A very good old woodcrafting skill, also a very common man. So stay with me here. We're going to find a couple of choice pieces out of here and cut them down, and we'll talk about them. Okay, so I've got two similar diameter here. And the way I measured those really was, I just kind of put it down to my hip, and I want that thing right about close to the top of my head. Because remember, when I spread it out, it's going to shorten that a little bit as far as how tall it is, and I can always adjust it later. Better to cut a little bit long and have to worry about it later. Now these two are my uprights, so I don't need them very thick. I want this frame to be heavy duty, but I don't want it to be really heavy, and that's the point. So I'm using something that's about 3/4 inch in diameter that's live hardwood for that reason. Now I've got to find basically a lumbar piece, and I want it a little bit wider. So I'm going to try to cut something that's thick enough I can split it, so I can actually use that as a split. So we'll look around here and we'll find something to get that cut. Be right back. Okay guys, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to split this piece of oak. And I'm just going to grab a baton over here.
There's plenty of
Nice piece of maple over here. And I'm going to go ahead and use this old hickory butcher knife. You know, if you're going to test stuff, you really got to beat on it. I got a pretty flat end on that side, so I'm going to kind of try to find the center of this piece. Get it centered up there. And I'm going slow. I'm not getting in a hurry because I'm watching for it to run out on me. But I don't want this round because it's going to be in my back. So I'd rather have the round facing out. You can see it's starting to run out a little bit on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in from the other side. And I can trim this up when I'm done. Okay. Now, I've got two sides of this, and I can decide which one I want to use for the back of the frame. I pretty much split it right down the pulp right there. And I can also debark this thing if I want to, which I probably will do. Since it's rough and it's oak, I'll just go ahead and knock the bark off of it now. Obviously, I've decided I'm going to use the thicker side. And I'll trim it to length in a minute with a saw. That's close enough for right now. Now, I'm going to take the thickest, actually I think I'm going to take the thinnest part of this because it's not really, it's plenty thick right there. And what I want is I want this thing to be about just a little bit wider than my back is. So if I put a fist up against my, right there on top of my hip, and another fist on top of my hip on this side, my cut line is right here. So I'll go ahead and just put a notch right there so I remember where it's at. Get my saw and cut that off now. So let's go ahead and cut this off. not getting in a big hurry with the saw because I don't want to split this wood out. So I'm not really putting a lot of pressure on it, just kind of letting the blade do the work. Now that's going to give me a nice backrest that's flat, and I can bend that if I want to a little bit to form that while it's green. It's much easier to get that wood to form. Once it's dried out, it's not going to do that. So that gives us our back piece, and it's a little bit thicker here than it is here. So we could take a little bit of that off if we wanted to, for sure. Okay, so I've cut myself another small stick here. I'll show you the trick behind that in a few minutes. So the first thing I want to do is I want to put just a straight lash on these two sticks. That will tighten itself up when I cross them, because that's going to be how my frame's going to sit, with these two tops sticking up. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use what's called a timber hitch knot in the beginning of this. And basically all you're going to do is you're going to take and twist the rope like this. And that's going to form your loop. You're not going to tie anything, you're just going to twist it. So I'm going to pull myself off some line here, about 3 feet, something like that. Cut that off. And this is really where bank line shines, because this stuff is really, really good at binding to itself. So again, we just twisted that line to give us a loop. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put this line through that loop to form a slip knot. And we didn't have to tie any knots in that to do that. And we're going to move that down to about where we want it, to the bottom of our lash, where the bottom of our lashing is going to be. Okay, just like this. Then we're going to go and lash it in circles just like this, about 5 or 6 times. Now this is where the other stick comes in, because what you want to do with this while you're lashing is you want to grab that and pull it as tight as you can while you're lashing it. And like I said, that tarred Mariner's bank line has a really good tendency to bind on itself. So if you do this just every couple lashings, if you'll just take and wrap that a couple times to where it locks on and pull on it, you'll get a really, really strong lash right there. And we're going to wrap that around there probably 6 or 8 times. The number's really up to you. Depends on how strong and permanent you want the frame to be, more than anything else. Now, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, when I twist this out, this is what I'm going to have sticking up. Do I want that much of the frame sticking up or not? Well, I think I do. So I'm going to leave it the way it is, all right? Then what I'm going to do is, after I've wrapped that thing about 10 times and given myself a really good crank with the stick to make sure that's tight, now I need to put in what's called the frapping, okay? And the frapping wraps go between the stick, the two sticks like this, and just pull it down tight on the stick. If you got a knot in there or something you got to get around, just pull it down over that knot. You might have to separate your sticks a little bit to get that thing to go down. Just like that. And then you're just going to come between the sticks like this, and again, pulling them tight. So every time I do that, I want to grab that thing and yank on it, because I want that frapping just as tight as my lashing. Well, my lashing is what I've got on the stick, and the frapping is what's around it, around the actual lashing itself. And I'm going to wrap around that 3 or 4 times. And again, I'm going to try to stack it as I go, as neat as I can. And every couple wraps, like I said, same thing. pull that lashing as hard as you can, or that frapping as hard as you can to get it tight. And now you're coming out the bottom where you went in on the top. And you take a couple wraps around one of your sticks and you make a clove hitch knot, which means you're going to wrap around twice, basically. So you've got 2 wraps right there. And this line is going to go back up through both wraps, kind of like this. And pull down tight. And again, get your stick out. Give that thing a major league yank. Make sure it's good and tight. Pull it all the way up. Make sure everything's cinched up tight so that when you spread that thing out, it's not coming undone. Okay, and you should have a good, safe frapping at that point and a good lashing. So now what you're going to do is, if you've got some extra cordage, you can use it and just wrap it around the other side, just like this. It's not going to hurt anything to do that. And put a half hitch there as well, or put a clove hitch there as well. So I'm going to do that. Again, get your stick though every time. If you're going to do that, make sure you get those lashings, those frappings and lashings just super tight. Again, give yourself a clove hitch on that side when you're done. So get a couple wraps around it. Put that up through the wraps. Scoot all those wraps up together like that and stack them real neat. Get your stick on there if you can. If you haven't ran out of line by then. Pull that thing tight. And at that point with the bank line, it's real easy just to trim that off with your knife and burn it, and it'll melt right to that. And then there's no way that's coming out of there. So if I've got a fire, I can use a fire. If I don't have a fire, then I'll just use my lighter. And if you just kind of melt the end of that a little bit, it's very much like paracord in that it's a synthetic material. And just push it over the top, and you're going to be good to go. Now you've got the top of your frame pretty much done. And this thing should be just about the width of your body. Your X should be just about the width of your body. And that's pretty close to what we want right there. Now your bottom part that goes here is going to be put on with a diagonal lash. Not much different, just a little bit from the straight lash that we just did. Okay guys, on this side of the pack frame, down at the bottom here, we're going to use what's called a diagonal lash. And everything starts out exactly the same. We take our line, we twist it 3 or 4 times to make our timber hitch. We got our tail there. We put our frame where we want it. I want about 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches, something like that, just sticking out there. And I can always, later on, I can always go back and trim some of this stuff up with a knife, like this tag end right here. I can trim that up later. That's not a big deal. So I'm just going to pull that through the loop, pull that line through the loop. Make sure I've got enough wraps on my timber hitch here that's going to hold. My first lashings are going to go over that anyway. Get myself where I want to be. Throw a couple lashes on there, and then grab my stick and really crank her down tight. Just like that. A couple more wraps real quick, and we'll do it again. Okay, now the reason this is called a diagonal lash is because this next wrap is going to go up and around here and be lashed diagonal across here, so in an X fashion. Okay, now I lost a little bit of my tag end there, but that's okay. And again, I'm going to do a couple of wraps first, as neat as I can get them. I'm actually going to do 3. And then I'm going to get that toggle, the beauty of toggles, and really crank down on that thing, just like that. This is heavy duty bank line. This is number 36. You're not going to wear this stuff out. You're not going to break it. You're not going to hurt it cranking on it. Don't worry about that. Give yourself a couple wraps below, frappings, like this. And then again, with the toggle, crank that thing down. Get it good and tight. All right. Come up diagonally one time to the top, and then wrap a couple frapping wraps the same amount up there, just like this. I get 3 around there. What am I going to do? I'm going to grab that toggle. Wrap that toggle around there and crank down on it. And then, again, I want that clove hitch. So I can take one wrap, pull it down, one wrap, pull it down, pull that thing straight up to form that clove hitch. And again with the toggle, I want that thing coming undone. Give it a good crank. Then I'm going to cut it and melt it so it doesn't come undone. Kind of wait until it starts to melt real good, and then pushing it right over the top, just like that. That gives us one diagonal lash on that side, and then we'll have to do the same exact thing on the other side. Okay, so my pack frame is pretty much squared away. I've got a little tag right here that came from my timber hitch that I can just trim. If I want to, I can burn that, but it's not necessary. Now what I've got here is a frame, no straps, no anything else. So what am I going to use to strap this to my back? Well, the easiest thing to use is a piece of rope. So what I've got here is I've got about 18 foot of hemp rope, and it's more than I need, but it's going to give me some options. I've cut this rope in 2 places because I had a piece that was rotten or I didn't like. So now I want to keep this from coming undone, because it is natural fiber rope. It's going to want to come undone. So I'm going to show you how to put some bank line wrapping on this to keep that from happening, since we're talking about lashings and wraps. Hang on, guys. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a piece of bank line. I've got a piece over here that's already cut, and it might be enough for both ends. What I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to take my end, I'm going to form a loop just like this in my bank line, and I'm going to put that loop down toward the bottom like this, and I've got to leave myself enough tag I can get a hold of it if I don't have a pair of pliers with me, which I don't. So I've got to leave myself a little extra tag at the top to get a hold of with my toggle. And then I'm going to take that and I'm going to start wrapping it from the top down, and I'm going to wrap it as tight as I can get it around that rope. So I'm really squeezing down on that thing, going right down that loop, wrapping over the top just like this, as hard as I can wrap it, as tight as I can get it, keeping those wraps good and tight all the way down. And if I wrap it 10-15 times, doesn't matter, I'm just going to wrap till I get to the bottom of that loop. And when I get to the bottom of that loop, I'm going to take my tag end and I'm going to put it through that loop, just like this. So I've pulled my Lash wrap tag in through that loop. Then I'm going to take my end I've got at the top and wrap my toggle around it a couple of times, and I'm going to give it a good yank to pull that loop up through a couple of those wraps if I can. Once I've done that, that thing's not coming undone. Now I can trim both my ends with my knife, burn them, fold them over like we talked about. So I'll give myself just a little bit of tag there and cut that off. Same thing at the top, give myself a little bit of tag and cut it off. And melt that down with my lighter. And I'm going to do that to both ends of this rope so that I don't have to worry about the ends of this rope fraying out and coming undone on me. This bank line will keep that from happening. Okay, now that we have our pack frame and our piece of rope, how do we utilize this for a set of pack straps? Well, that's real easy. What we're going to do is we're going to even our rope up at the bottom like this. We're going to come down and grab that loop, and if this is going to be on the outside of our pack here, we're going to put our loop that direction through those two V's and pull the excess line tight, just like this, so that we have a solid wrap coming out that inside, just like that. All right, now I'll show you where to go from here. Okay guys, so now we've got this, and these two, basically, once this is tight, it takes a little bit of doing to get that rope tight in there. That goes over our head just like this, so that the pack frame is sitting on our back. Okay, now we can decide whether we want this to the inside or the outside. People wear it different. I like it on the outside so I can kind of use it as a shelf. A lot of people like it on the inside. Then you're going to take these two tag ends and you're going to feed them through the pack frame like this and under, just like this, okay, and under, okay. What that's going to do is that's going to allow you to tighten that frame up on your back. Now you can see what that looks like on my back, and I like these to be kind of on the inside like that. And then I've got this rope left over that I can use to wrap around my waist as a waist belt and just tie it off. What you can do with this that works real well is take one side of this and make yourself a loop. Just tie a figure-8 knot in that rope so it's easy to get out. I guess we should have talked about figure-8 knots, but basically you're just going to go twice around the rope and then back up through to form a loop. And that's a knot that's pretty easy to get back out after the fact. Then you can take this side of the rope, feed it through that figure-8 knot, and it gives you a way to lash that tight by pulling on it like this, and that'll tighten up that frame on your back. And then you just pull a loop through the bottom of the belt right here and through the bottom just like this, and you have a quick release knot. If you had to get rid of that pack frame for some reason, all you'd have to do is pull this and it would come undone. So that gives you a good quick release knot. If you tie a square knot in that thing, you're going to have a heck of a time getting that pack frame off. If you fall through ice or fall into water, something like that, where that pack frame becomes heavy on you, you're going to have a heck of a time getting that off without that quick release knot. So that makes it real good. Now, tomorrow we'll discuss how to pack this frame and how we would use this frame for a pack if we didn't have a pack, how we could set up our equipment and gear to be on this hard external frame. We'll talk about that in part 2 of this video. I appreciate you guys joining me for this one. I thank you for your support. I thank you for everything you do for me, for my school, for my family, for my friends and affiliates, and I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks, guys.